This is Catherine Schneider from the Fitchburg Historical Society. We are continuing with our series of interviews that we've been doing during COVID with people who are prominent in the Fitchburg community from business and education, government. Today, we have the pleasure of having Amy Niemetscheck with us from Certco. She is the CEO and president there, and she's been very kind to give us some of her time today to talk about Certco and their journey through COVID over these last 2 years. So Amy, thank you for being with us. We so appreciate it. So we know Certco, of course, is located very prominently along Highway 18 151 and then intersecting with McKee Road. So I remember seeing that so many times as I've passed by on the road, and I've always wondered, wonder what goes on in there in those buildings. So maybe if you could just start us off with a brief history of Certco and then how you serve the retail grocers, maybe a little bit about size of your business, physical space there, number of employees, anything you'd like to share with us.
Sure. So thanks again for the opportunity. We, as you said, we've been located here at this location since about the mid-1960s, but Certco was formed back in 1930. It was based on the idea of pooling retailers together to buy together to get obviously the best cost for them, as well as more likely to receive product as they ordered it. So we've been around just over 90 years in business. So we are lucky to be organized as a cooperative still, even though we are a C Corp. So we are owned by the customers that we service. So it creates a really powerful customer service statement when anytime I have a new employee start, that in essence we're servicing the stockholder, not just a customer sale for us. So we exist because they exist, and we are supplying independent grocers. So we service about 250 miles around the Madison area. So we get up into northern Wisconsin, out into Iowa, and then into northern Illinois as well. We have 3 actual total distribution centers in Dane County. We have our distribution center here at Verona Road. We have just over 300 employees who either are working at different shifts here, are in our back office area. We also include in that 300 count some of our sales staff that aren't necessarily here, but the headquarters are here. And then we have 2 facilities that are near the East Side campus, we call it, off of Stoughton Road. And those buildings are our perishable building, and also our kind of where we have our non-food is what we call it. So health and beauty aids, general merchandise, candy is kept over there. So different segregation as we've grown. So over all 3 facilities, we have 1 million square feet. This facility here is about 450,000. And then also in the city of Fitchburg, we have our fleet maintenance facility, which is not necessarily right at the corner of PD and Verona Road. That's back on Spoke Drive, which was added as part of the DOT project when 18151 was revamped over the last 10 years. So that's where we're servicing all of our trucks and trailers. We do own our own fleet here as well. So we have about 50 drivers that handle all the delivery of product across the different states. So
it's a big operation in your chain. Thank you for that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, to get into the pandemic, so it's been almost 2 years. This is March of 2022. Mm-hmm. And could you speak maybe to the specifics from the grocery business, the different stages maybe that you've gone through this pandemic, this 2 years of pandemic?
Yeah. So I always will remember, I know the exact day. It's March 13th of 2020. It was a Friday. For many of our stores, they felt the real impact in our area, March 12th. That was really when, schools were deciding to close. Things were kind of being put on halt, but that was the day that kind of goes down and is my most memorable as far as product panic buying, right? Consumers were out from everything, as we all know, toilet paper, sanitizers, any of those Clorox wipes that you couldn't find for months. So we, in essence, we've always been a 24/7 operation, because that's what our stores are, right? Our independent grocers are always open. And it was just to that crazy degree. So we were shipping out product in, a 2 days time period is what we would ship out an entire week, over that early part of March. So, so you went through that, and then you also had that panic of your employees, right? How am I going to keep my employees protected? You can't necessarily have your warehousemen and your drivers given an opportunity to work remote, but we in essence had to look at our back office jobs and take positions that were really never allowed to be remote and consider making them remote, because supply chain, as we all have felt, can get disrupted in a hurry. If I had buyers, for example, all become ill, right? So we, in essence, took any job that could physically be done, because the majority of it is at a desk, working on a computer and different programs we have, and put them remote. So, our business went through that, which we were not really grounded for. So, we had people walking out with printers and monitors and writing stuff down kind of on the fly, right? And then it was just getting that supply chain is back to normal as we could, right? So we were purchasing product the same way we sold it. Like, as I said, where 2 days was a week's worth of supply, it took a full week for that product to come back in. So, I remember that day as well. It was the following Friday where I pulled into the parking lot and there was probably 60 trucks. So we typically receive during third shift. And that was so heartwarming to me, because product showed back up, right? And we were going to have product to sell again. But you wait on many things, just like you have heard throughout the last 2 years. The manufacturers weren't able to obviously keep up with the increased demand. So we were making decisions about, how do you treat all of our owners equally, right? So how do you determine the best way to make sure everybody felt they were getting their fair share of our customers? So, you work through your technology, you work through, many discussions with my board. 7 of our current members are my board of directors. So I went from having a monthly meeting to daily emails, sometimes at least twice a week phone calls, just trying to come up with the best plan, because this was something we had never really gone through before. I reached out a lot I have a peer group that I'm part of other wholesalers around the country that are organized like us. So I use them a lot. One of them actually was in the South, and he had a really good example. He said COVID to the grocery world is like shopping before a hurricane. They in essence stock up. There's certain key items that you have to make sure you have. So that was actually really useful to try to come up with some good plans of getting through things. So, but then, just, putting measures in place for our people that are, in-house, the ones we couldn't put remote, and COVID policies, and the human resource part that became a never ending, what else can we try to do? So from thermal imaging, cameras that people had to walk into before you enter the building to take your temperature, things that we never dreamed of really having before. Obviously the masks that everybody had to wear for so many years, and making sure that was always up to what the most recent guidance was telling you the mask definition was. So it's been quite a roller coaster, and challenges that when I took over this role, I really didn't expect. So it's been very challenging, but also very rewarding to get to where we have been. So
just listening to you, Amy, it's a realization of how much you've been through, and the creativity you've needed, just changing and working through something entirely new, new and stressful, and trying to keep up with all of it, and knowing that you could do it. You have done it.
It's been like I said, I'm very fortunate that our employees they step up every time I've ever asked. Like I said, we're very fortunate with our corporate structure. we are dealing with our owners when I'm calling, not just a customer. So we're all in this together, as they say, right? It really came through. So.
And Amy, I just wanted to ask also about maybe what you've noticed in terms of the public's food purchasing habits. Have you seen changes in those? I know you mentioned, certainly those things we noticed at first. We're all, that toilet paper and sanitizer shortages.
Yeah.
Maybe trends in general through the pandemic for people's purchasing, particularly in groceries.
Yeah. So, there's been many studies about, obviously initially people that shopped at grocery stores and that fear of necessarily going in, right? So e-commerce in our grocery world is here to stay, right? So many of our independent grocers that we service, they either had pickup or delivery service, and that, really changed the percentage of sales that people were buying through online grocery versus physically going to a store. A lot of people utilized customer pickup. And I think now you still look at that as it's not going to go back. I mean, people look at the value of their time and where can I pick up a couple minutes, or I don't want to lug all my kids out of the car to go in. So that's going to be here to stay and probably just continue to grow. So, the independent that didn't have that, they found a way to create that because they didn't want to not be able to fill those customer needs. And we've been, our company's been very fortunate. We service, like I said, all different size retailers, but we have approximately 57,000 different products that we house. It's a lot, right? Mm-hmm. So we're fortunate that when, let's say, your regular Cheerios, let's say, might not have been available, right? Whether it's a private brand, we had alternatives, right? And the consumer, I think, has learned, I might not be able to find, that specific brand, but wow, there's a lot of other manufacturers of food that are similar and the quality is probably okay. So, you've seen that shift in that brand loyalty kind of change, and consumers are now open to seeing different items. And obviously, as of the last, especially like year, right, inflation is driving a lot of that consumer behavior to change. They need a value statement. They want their grocery bill not to be increasing like you hear on the news. So, making sure that we're trying as much as possible to keep that variety, because that gives the consumer, the end person sitting at our retailer stores, alternatives to make their budget work, which has been huge. And I think just people have learned to cook. People didn't have restaurants to go out to. So everyone that, those generations you heard never knew how to cook, and they always were just stopping in and grabbing their one meal because they were going to go out the next 5. They learned, and now they're happy to cook at home and they make events out of it, which is really neat to see. And that's obviously good for our retailers and good for us. So, yeah.
Great. Lots has happened during this time to change some of the ways we do things, some of our habits.
Yeah.
So you touched upon maybe how you responded to the COVID and where you went for getting guidance. Would you like to speak to that anymore? Because it was a brand new experience.
Yeah, like I said, I mean, the peer group that I'm involved with was extremely helpful. That way of really leaning on someone who equated COVID to a hurricane. I mean, that was really great information to utilize. But, for us, it was, our own internal resources, whether it was our insurance company, everywhere from the attorneys, right? You were writing policies that didn't exist. And, they were all extremely helpful. And we utilized actually a ton of our employees. You in essence put out your initial COVID protocol, and then you have somebody raise their hand and go, well, what if we do this? Great idea. So I think that just kind of speaks volumes of who we are and our culture we have here, that we listen to employees, we listen to their input, because they're the ones day in and day out that are seeing things and seeing potential risks that we should be thinking about alternatives. I think the one thing that came up was just a simple time clock, right? I mean, they don't use cards, but they were using their hand, right? Their hand gets programmed in and they're like, well, that seems a little unsanitary, right? Early on, we didn't know how this virus was spreading. So, you reach out to your payroll system and, oh, what do you know? There's an app. There's an app they can go and sign in, and it geofences around your facility. So, people are not, not that they would be unfair about their punch, but you tried things different. And that might stay for a while now because that's been more convenient. It's more sanitary. You don't have 35 guys standing in front of a time clock before their shift or at break, but multiple times during the day. So that was really, I think, it was very powerful for me as a leader to see all that involvement and everybody really wanting to make sure we were making good decisions to keep everyone safe and healthy. So yeah, but that's probably the most I can recall right now. So
thank you. Everyone working to make it possible to continue to do what you do every day, but
right.
in different ways.
Mm-hmm.
I'd just like to ask a little bit about, we're all noticing, of course, our grocery bills going up, and wondering if you can give us any insight into, is that driven somewhat by COVID or other factors involved in that? Could you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, so, early on, obviously, besides people panic buying, right, that created that huge hit on supply and demand, that never slowed down. So you had anything from as simple as aluminum cans to the bottles your water or Gatorade might be in to, they were having labor constraints. I think many people in the workplace, this pandemic created a what's important in life experience for many people around the world. And people decided, you know what, I don't need either this job or this commute or whatever the reason might have been. But opportunity where people lost so many employees, right? And because you saw that void of employees, and no matter what you were manufacturing, as automated as it could be, it had an impact. So you take all those jobs going away, you tried to get people to come back to work, right? And many of them were getting into a different lifestyle of what they could live on, and what was going to entice them to come back for additional wages, right? So you have pressure from these all the way up the food chain, from supply constraint, from raw ingredients to just what they're actually supplied and packaged in, cardboard costs. Everything involved in transportation, right? You saw the gas prices creeping. They're even more so now. So all these contributing factors of what truly goes in when you think about what it takes to get that product from not even being food that you're going to intake all the way to when it actually arrives at the store on the shelf. I mean, tons of cost components that were impacted. But, at the beginning, yeah, just that employee void for so long did not help, because it had a domino effect up and down the food chain to impact costs in so many areas, that's driving a ton of it. But yeah, it's a crazy world we're in, and inflation that I know my role prior to CEO was in financial. So I was the CFO before I took this role. And so I started, and there was, on average 2, 3, 4%, right, on a big year. And now my CFO, before she'll deliver the financial statements, and there's an adjustment for booking our inventory. And it's sizable every single month. I mean, monthly entries that you don't see for a year's time. So yeah, the impact, and trying to work with your retailers to make sure that, they still have a value proposition. When I was talking about variety, right? And it's unusual to me that different manufacturers are coming out with these increases, and 3 months later they come out with another one. So what is happening so quickly that we can't quite see where that's going to stop. So that's frightening across the board, because we're involved in that food chain. So I know my people have to go to the grocery store and buy groceries for more money too, right? So you have these pressures on wages, and everything you read says the wages aren't going to keep up with what the inflation is. And what does that do for retention? So, and it's not just grocery, that's everywhere. So every person has to deal with as an employer because your people are buying groceries. And so
it's a complex picture, isn't it?
It sure is.
So many different factors involved in it.
Mm-hmm.
Amy, can you tell us what you think? And again, you mentioned a couple of things already, but what do you think will be some of the permanent changes that come out of our having, lived through COVID, particularly from your business in grocery, helping with grocery retail, all of that supplying. What do you see besides the employees and how they're checking in? I think that's a marvelous adaptation.
Yeah. So I think, obviously I might have mentioned this earlier, but just how the end consumer shopping, right? So, e-commerce pickup or delivery, I don't see that going away. Everyone has, whether it's, Chewy to buying your pet supplies to, a pickup at one of our local retailers. It's the value of your time and the value of what you want to be doing with your life, right? I think that's the bigger thing that COVID has done for so much of the public is reprioritized what's important. And, you saw that with just people's cooking at home. And you hear about those stories of busy families who were spending, maybe 2 meals a week together at the table because mom was taking one to a soccer practice and dad was running this one to a recital. And that all stopped for a moment in time. And, people enjoyed that. They enjoyed that togetherness again. So I think, that instilling that in not just your family life, but as an employer, I think is going to be something that we're going to have to strive to do because that's a culture that people expect. As I said, we put a lot of our back office remote for the protection of them and they could do their job remotely. We never, before COVID, I don't think would have entertained a hybrid work policy where you could work remote part-time. We have that now. It's flexible work schedules because that's the anticipation of the generation that it works now and definitely the generation coming in my opinion. They like that flexibility. I also think, just slipped my mind where I was going with that. It had to do with employees and just that work-life balance. But, we need to instill these things for retention, but recruitment. We're also, we're seeing this void in CDL drivers, and that's, like I said, we have over 50 drivers that work for us. And it's not necessarily retention, but retirement for us. We have a lot of people on the outlook as close as 6 to 12 months that we're going to look to replace. So things that, companies have talked about from a tuition reimbursement program, we're now trying to decide at what point do you stop trying to entice people to drive? So, we're entertaining ideas of tuition reimbursement for regardless of what you currently do at Certco. If you have this passion of maybe wanting to drive a semi truck and trailer because there's such a need for it, and we're unique that we do offer that quality of life. So you are home every night still. Your drive for us allows you to still sleep in your own bed, which I think is a huge win of how we've kept our drivers. They're not sleeping in the back of their cabs. We don't have sleepers in our trucks. But that doesn't stop the retirement and the aging of these CDL drivers that we do still have. So, I think that's going to be something that is here now. And it's, you hear the numbers of the people leaving that versus coming in. And there's different constraints on that too, because business insurance likes to have a different picture of just an 18-year-old that has their CDL. That's not necessarily who they want to insure. They want to insure somebody who's been driving for 6 years. Well, where do you find them? Everybody's offering, signing bonuses or anything to try to retain and rehire CDL drivers. So that's a huge void that we've been very fortunate to keep because, like I said, that work life, they're home every night or day, depending if they're night or day drivers for us. But, we can't ignore that that's going to continue to be a problem to try to replace them. So, yeah.
Amy, you can see from our conversation how busy you are every day trying to.
I love it.
and you love it.
Yeah.
So could I just ask you maybe to talk a little bit about your personal experience with COVID? What's it been like for you over these last couple of years, both maybe work-wise and home-wise? Anything you'd care to share with us about that? And then maybe the final question, is there anything that has helped you remain hopeful as, this has been a tough period of time. Everyone has been walking through this and knowing how difficult it's been. So maybe tell if you'd like to share anything about your own personal experience with COVID.
Yeah. So when I was speaking of that mom running one kid to one practice and dad to another, that is my life. I'm a mom besides the CEO of a company. So I have 3 children, 13, 11, and 9. So my life outside of work was extremely hectic, very active in sports. All 3 of my kiddos are. So, we had that aha moment where, in essence, I remember it very clearly. It was our in-home our in-city tournament, basketball tournament we were hosting that next weekend after March 13th, and all that got canceled, right? And the defeat on my kids of their passion, what they love to do and live this tournament, right, in their hometown was not going to happen in 2020. And that shift, right? They were in a district that obviously went virtual, and that waiting period between spring break and waiting that out of how does that look. And myself in my role, even though, a lot of my back office, as I said, I put remote, I was always a firm believer that, my lifeblood is my guys and ladies that come in to work in the warehouse and make sure our drivers are hitting the road. And I knew every one of my board members were still opening their doors at every grocery store. So I was going to be coming to work every single day. My husband's extremely supportive, and he actually pre-COVID had already had a job where he was working out of the house in computer programming. So that for us was it was already kind of stable. He was there. But that was a shift from when they did try to finish the year, that first year virtual, right? And juggling, he still had his job to do at work at home. I was still trying to run the company here. So, I had a great chairman on my board at the time. I have a great chairwoman now as well. But, I, in essence, had one of those moments, everybody did, where you felt completely defeated. And I went to him and I said, something's got to give. I get I'm running this business, but my husband's trying to teach 3 kids different English and math in different ways and get on different Zoom calls for their meetings with their classrooms. So, extremely supportive. And we worked on something for a schedule for me that worked a little bit for me to be there with them. And then obviously plenty of time to be here with my employees and in stores that we service here. So, that's kind of where my personal was. And then just reestablishing, like I said, we were that family that had our weekends. We had our Friday, Saturday, and Sundays. Those were our dinners. But a lot of the rest of the week, we were throwing a sandwich at somebody in the back seat with, on the way to go get the other one to give them their little packed up lunch/dinner. And it just brings back a whole new appreciation. So, we try now that they're older, you can actually have dinner at 7. You don't all have to eat at 5:30. So, we're trying to do that every night now. When everyone's schedule has that 30 minutes where we're together, because it grounds you as a family. It seems like such a short amount of time, but it's so valuable to me, and I don't want to give that up again. So, and then obviously here, I spoke about, our culture and being extremely open door all the way up to my office. and being open to opinions and ideas. And that it started with the safety thing, but it's come with kind of all full circle now. So employees are excited to have kind of their family at work too. And they want to have a good culture here. So people are coming up with creative ideas from, how do we retain, how should we revamp our training program here? Just people that are just all hands on deck. And that, I think, was created because we had to come together during some really stressful times. And that shows weaknesses and powerful people, of what you can accomplish when you're all on the same mission. So it's been a crazy road, but one that's been extremely rewarding too. So,
and what a wonderful, wonderful place to end on, Amy. We thank you so much for opening your door, your office door to us today. And as I drive by Certco, I will have such a much deeper understanding of what goes on there and the culture that you're creating there, and their service to the community. So thank you so very much for being with us today.
Thank you.
And take good care.
You as well. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'd just like to mention that the interview that we've just had with Amy will be not only on Talking Fitchburg Fact TV, but also will be put on the website, Fitchburg Historical Society's website. So just to remind people that is fitchburghistory.org. So please join us anytime online and find out a lot more about Fitchburg and what brought us to be who we are as a community. So thank you again, Amy.
Thanks.